Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brittany Mitchell from the Institute for Community Inclusion, and welcome to today's Community of Practice meeting. And the topic for today will be identifying and partnering with disability service providers and advocacy organizations. Before we get started, I'd like to give you a few tips about how to use the Zoom platform. We like to make the discussion as interactive as possible. So if at any time you'd like to chime into the discussion, please feel free to unmute yourself and chime in via the audio. If you have any issues regarding the connectivity to the audio through your computers, I will post a phone number for you all to also call in as an option. There's also an option to raise your hand using the Zoom platform. So if at any time a presenter is speaking and you would like us to give you the opportunity to speak later in the conversation, please feel free to do that. In addition, there is a chat box. So if you are not connected to the audio, or if you just would like to type your question or comment instead of posing it verbally, please feel free to use the chat box. And if you look there, the link to the closed captions is also posted there now. And also, if you have any other questions regarding Zoom, please feel free to type into the chat box and I will do my best to help you resolve any issues. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Jack Brummel, who will be leading today's discussion.
All right, thank you so much to Brittany. So welcome everybody. We're happy to be introducing this. We're really pleased to be a part of the Cdfi Fund's Access for All initiative. And this, as you know, since you have been in discussions with us, is our first community of practice call. We're going to have today several leads in the discussion, but we're going to be turning to all participants in order to take part. So Susan Takow, and I think that this was in the original notification. So Susan Takow is with us, Danny Housley, Charlie, I see that you are with us as well. And so those will be the leads as we go through. And then people will be opening it up. We've got an hour and a half, and what we're going to try to do, we've got 5 subtopics to address. And what we're going to try to do is address each of the subtopics in 15 minutes. So we'll try to have about 7 minutes per lead for the discussion. We'll be calling on, most of the time we'll be calling on all 3 of the lead discussants. And then about half the way through the 15 minutes, we'll open it up to the rest of the participants so that we can get perspectives from others and also address your questions that you might have. So I think we're ready to go. And the first topic is the use of statewide organizations in order to learn more about what's out there, identify partners and providers and advocates. And Susan, we're going to start with you to talk about this subtopic.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Susan Takow, and thank you, Jack, for introducing me. I'm with Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation. So we are the alternative financing program here in Pennsylvania. And the alternative financing programs are part of the Federal Assistive Technology Act. So I am assuming that most of our organizations have maybe one person that's doing, or 2 people who are doing kind of relationship building, that other people, at least our organization's small, other people are actually doing a lot of the loan work. So the underwriting, some communications, but in fact, in our shop, for example, there's primarily only 2 of us, and neither of us is at a full-time job, who were trying to build relationships and kind of create the public awareness that we exist and what our programs are. So I would have my part in this, and I want to then leave time for Danny and Charlie to talk, is to mention very briefly 4 organizations that I would reach out if I were starting all over again that would help give me the lay of the land in my area. These are all statewide organizations, and I am very aware that although alternative financing programs are statewide, that most of the CDFIs are regional, whether it's a small region or a large region, but not necessarily statewide and not necessarily just one state. So the first thing I would do is try to find out other like organizations. And you can do that by looking up the assistive technology programs within your state. So you can Google that, and there are 2 programs in many states. Every state has a state Assistive Technology Act project. So every state has a state AT project. And if you Google that and look on what's called the AT for Assistive Technology 3 project, you can find your state AT project. So for us in Pennsylvania, it would be, I would look at and find the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University. However, this same website does not include all of the information for the alternative financing programs. And the state AT projects, some of them work in financing, but most do not. But what they do is they're trying to link people with disabilities and older people and family members to access of AT. So it means it's cross-disability. And the alternative financing programs, they are cross-disability by design. So if you can link into your alternative financing program or your state AT program, right there you've got kind of, you can ask the questions of what disability organizations are kind of strong in our area, and you can then prioritize, you know, obviously statewide or regional for you. If you want to know about your alternative financing programs, what we've put on our website, PATF, or Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation.us, we have a link under who we are to all of the alternative financing programs in the country. We've got the only up-to-date list of them. And so, you know, whether it's Anna from Iowa who wants to know who might be in Nebraska or might be in North Dakota, we've got that information. The third program I would talk to is every state has a statewide independent living council. Those are federal and state funded programs. So the bulk of the money comes from the Administration on Community Living, the Department of Health and Human Services, with a small state match. And the SILCs, Statewide Independent Living Council, they are designed to bring together people of all disabilities and family members so that you can create systems within your state to increase access to inclusion, whether it's, you know, voting, community living, whatever programs are in your state. It's designed to help people live independently. As you know, financial well-being is independent living. So if I had only 3 calls I could make, I would call the alternative financing program because they're financing devices for people with disabilities and family members, your state AT project, and your independent living council. And then lastly, every state has a Hearing Loss Association of America, and that would be the first of many of the disability-specific organizations that are statewide. I mean, like, you know, there are ARCS, Association for Retarded Citizens, no longer called that, called ARCS. There are cerebral palsy associations, MS societies, but hearing loss they have a whole network for every state, and hearing aids are something that needs to be financed. Very few programs, health insurance programs finance it. Medicare does not. So if you want an immediate link with your CDFI, you can do that. If you're interested in consumer lending, you can do that with hearing loss. So Jack, do you want me to pass the baton to Danny?
Yeah, let's let Danny go, and then see if Charlie wants to add anything after Danny. Go ahead,
Okay.
Danny.
So hello, I'm Danny Housley, and I help manage the alternative financing program in Georgia. I work for the Assistive Technology Act program. We work collaboratively with a nonprofit to do our alternative financing program, Credit Able. So a lot of my background is in that relationship building kind of area. So I am a board member of the National Federation of the Blind of Georgia. So we are a peer-led organization, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of those other relationships coming up. But yeah, I totally agree with Susan that starting with something like your independent living council, statewide independent living council, looking to see, because a lot of them have regional offices, that's very important. That cross-disability aspect is vital when you want to kind of look at the community as a whole, and then look at maybe doing some targeted things for your program. So if you did want to focus on something like hearing, you may go to your hearing loss association website, or you may go to your, in Georgia, we have the Georgia Association of the Deaf. Versus 4 is something that I often do. Councils for organizations are great because they do provide a vital service. But when you look at if the word "of" is in the name, like the National Federation of the Blind, the Georgia Association of the Deaf, those are organizations that tend to be run by and for that population. So identifying those organizations is also important for community building. Reaching out to those groups and showing up to a meeting to talk about your program. That's important. A lot of these organizations, the disability specific groups, especially in Georgia, I can speak from experience, we have monthly or sometimes bi-weekly meetings for some of these groups. Sometimes they're going to have specific targeted areas. So like with the National Federation of the Blind, we have different units within the group. Some focus on aging, some focus on diabetes, some focus on those different aspects. So again, you're going to be able to reach a lot of people with that. Connecting with things like your alternative financing program and your AT Act, Assistive Technology Act, that's going to give you a possible audience for marketing as well. When you're looking at, we at Tools for Life, we give a lot of webinars. And that could be something where you get a targeted training for your organization, or it gives you an inroad to come in and maybe talk at a conference, talk at a webinar, talk at a group outing. So yeah, so those are great places to start. Those statewide groups, you can start big and then work your way down. Look at some of those regional and county-wide areas that are there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Daddy. I'm gonna. So Charlie, did you have anything to add before we go to the other participants?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, just 4 quickies because I want to build, not to be repetitive. I want to build on Susan. I want to build on Danny. In terms of one topic we didn't cover, SEPTAs. So in school districts all over the United States, you have PTAs. Well, there's also special education PTAs, SEPTAs, and they typically get together. It's a very good way to see a group of families all at the same time. There's usually, they have organized meetings and such, and that was good. Number 2, basically they're corollaries of themselves, 2 and 3. Mayor's offices and governor's offices if you look up, they will typically have a mayor's office for people with disabilities, a governor's office for people with disabilities. It's a very, very good way to be able to, and even on a county level, and there'll be a very good way to be able to go to one person or one office, introduce yourselves, and then get networked through a lot of people all at the same time. And then the last thing is, for anybody on the call focused on housing or anything related to something in the long lines of housing, each county in the United States gets ultimately federal money for home funds and such. And even though they may not have disabilities in the name of the agency, the housing agency, they're very, very good agencies to talk to about doing financing together. We've been very successful in doing that locally here in New York, and sort of matching up the federal grant money that they have locally to any financing money that you have as a CDFI to get some projects done. Those are my 4 contributions on this topic.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. And let's turn to our participant members. I know, Natalie in Oklahoma, you are affiliated, I think, with ATAP, an Assistive Technology project. Do you have, does your organization have any history of reaching out to other statewide organizations, and what would those be?
Yeah, Oklahoma Assistive Technology Foundation is the nonprofit arm, and we do work with the State Assistive Technology Act program in partnership, probably similar to what Danny said. And ours is kind of similar to what you guys have talked about in terms of reaching out with the other organizations as far as the independent living and the existing organizations that currently serve.
Okay. Other participants, I know, Anna, you've got a statewide organization. Are there, in Iowa, are there other statewide organizations serving people with disabilities that you turn to when you're trying to identify and partner?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So we work with Easter Seals of Iowa, Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, and Aging Resources.
Hello? Hello?
It looks
Oh,
like
yes, can you hear me?
It looks like we may have lost Jack.
Oh, well, well, that's unfortunate. Well, let me go back to Anna's comment real quickly about the aging resources, because I think that's something that isn't brought up very often. That is an excellent resource that every state has. Again, they're federally funded. If I'm talking about the same ones, Anna, they're links. And they're funded, again, under the Administration for Community Living. Is kind of the hope, or the desire was, one-stop shopping. And so that you should be able to go into a link and be able to ask any question, or try to find the resources you want. States develop them differently. In Pennsylvania, we used to go county by county. They saw that as a little unwieldy, so now it's regional. I don't know what other states are doing, but it is an established network that's years old that I think they too would be able to help if you're a small organization and you're just trying to get the lay of the land, like say I want to go into housing, where would be the first couple of phone calls I could make or visits, just so you're not overwhelmed with thinking about covering a whole new territory with a product you've got. Has anyone else had experience working with their link or their aging resources?
Yeah, to jump off that, this is Danny. We work closely with our, they're called ADRCs, here at Aging and Disability Resource Connections. So they work closely with a lot of the groups that we've already talked about, the Independent Living Network and some of those peer-led groups. And that's led to us reaching a lot of folks when it comes to aging, when it comes to, because there's aging and disability resource connection. So going back to that one-stop shop kind of mentality, we've worked with a lot of people moving them out of institutions and then helping with providing the resources and the connections that they need. Financial education for budgeting, because some folks are moving into the community from being out of it for a few months, and then some of it we're talking about years and maybe decades. So providing some of those skills as far as financial education, knowing how to open up a bank account, budgeting, all that good stuff. We have worked closely, and we have 16 regional offices throughout our state here in Georgia that do that.
Are you back with us, Jack?
He ran away.
I would. Well, that's Washington State for you. What do you say? Jack, are you back? Well, I see him there, but I don't think he can hear us. So perhaps we should keep moving. So did anyone else want to talk about their experience of working with statewide organizations, and which was it helpful? Were there particular organizations you found to be helpful that hasn't been mentioned? Brittany, are people off mute, or are they writing?
People can unmute themselves. I didn't see any comments in the chat box.
All right. Well, why don't we keep going then and talk about the second one, which is providing some concrete examples of how a partnership with your CDFI can benefit other organizations' clients or customers. And so,
relationships first, or
well,
with everything else.
Well, I don't know. These are the notes I have from Jack. Jack, can you? I see you. Can you hear us? Well,
Susan,
good old technology.
Susan,
Yeah.
the next, why don't we keep it in the order of the agenda that he listed, so that when he comes back on.
That sounds great.
So the next one is ways to develop relationships.
Okay.
I can jump in with that one to start out with. So what he has listed here is a great starting point. Attending events, being there is probably one of your best ways of developing a relationship with a community or an organization, getting the word out. There are so many opportunities, so many different types of events. And I will just let you know that you may hear a lot of screeching in the background of my audio. I have train tracks right outside my window here. So if it gets a little loud, that's what that is. But yeah, being there right now, we're in Georgia, we're in transition fair season. Every weekend, there are several transition fairs that people can go to. That's great for getting folks early and young, right? And when you look at, I mentioned before, some of those peer groups, the National Federation of the Blind and some of those peer-led organizations, they're having meetings that you can go to. Getting to know the leaders of some of those communities will go a long way to developing those relationships, strong and long-lasting ones, hopefully, right? But yeah, so going back to meetings, events, that's your best way of making those relationships, is just putting in some face time, putting in some mileage maybe to travel and to meet and greet the folks that are doing that. I know we always appreciate it. We appreciated it when I worked at the Center for Independent Living, when places would reach out to want to meet us or to share more information about their their organization. When we talk about the independent living centers, that's an excellent resource to tap into when you're trying to get people interested in your program or to meet the actual people in the community. Touching base with them and talking to their consumers, that is a way to make their consumers your consumers, to share the information.
Thanks, Denny. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, good. Okay. Charlie also wanted to speak on this. Charlie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm glad Danny took the lead. I would tell you that we have been fascinated by the power of LinkedIn. If you put yourselves on LinkedIn and you start doing the connections in the disability world, all of a sudden we have been getting connected to fascinating folks all over the country that has actually translated into business and loan requests and financing requests. And in following up to what Danny said, actually connects you to conferences and events and things that are happening. So you have to, again, for us, we have Disability Opportunity Fund in our name. Not everyone on this call sort of connect that way. But if you sort of find the little groups and you start connecting and make this known that this is of interest to you, you'll be fascinated to see how LinkedIn is very, very powerful.
Okay, Charlie, anything else in terms of developing relationships?
Well, again, our audience on this phone, obviously between CDFIs and other players, we have obviously been very fortunate to, for all these years, this is our 13th year of doing business, and we've been at OFN every year. We go to the CDFI Conference and Institute down in DC, which is the next 2 days down in DC, in the next couple of days. Trying to stay connected within and of course, the Disability Coalition of CDFIs that we've created is very, very important, because we can help you on the phone network with our networks, and it continues to sort of grow from there.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Susan, before we turn to the rest of the participants, anything else to add?
Well, the only thing that's different, because I fully support what Charlie and Danny said, is I'm a parent of an adult child who has a disability. And in my work, I'm also looking for other parents and people with disabilities to see if what our program has to offer would ring a bell to them. So when I'm working with the General Assembly in Pennsylvania or down in Washington, I'm doing my homework ahead of time to see if anyone has a disability or if a family member does, because I'm going to know they're going to understand my message a little more readily than kind of starting with scratch. And so that's how, when we first built our program, we got a banker, the sister of kind of the lead retailer, had Down syndrome. When I'm talking with Matt Cartwright down in Washington about the CDFI fund, he has dual digital hearing aids. So I do think, as we all kind of look each other and say who might have similar interests, even going on LinkedIn, seeing who has similar interests, I think it's also behooves us all to do a little research to say who has a family member has a disability, who themselves has a disability, and that means, you've already got something in common.
Okay, great. I keep getting this occasional notice from my computer that my internet is unstable. So I'm in a somewhat rural area. That happens. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right. So let's turn to other participants, folks that might have experience. I know that both Natalie and Anna are on the call, and they both have a history of working with people with disabilities and with other organizations. Do either of you want to add anything on the development of relationships?
Well, this is Anna.
Anna, do you have something? Go ahead.
Yes, and so we have been, one of the things I did is went to an event that was hosted by the United Spinal Association group, and I sat at their table, and just sitting at their table, I was able to meet the president of their chapter and then get to know their group as well. And they have a whole social media network of how they disseminate information. And so just sitting at that table at that event has been so incredibly helpful to me, because then they can put a face to a name, and also just connecting me to resources and individuals with spinal cord injuries, and that's been helpful. So I would say going to events has been helpful. And then the one lady that I carpooled with, I read an article about her because she received a Habitat for Humanity house that was an accessible home. And so I sent her a card and just said, you don't know me, but I would love to come and tour your house, and I'll bring you some cookies. And so she answers that my note card that I sent to her, and she jokes every time she introduces to me, this is my Iowa Able stalker. But she's nice, she brings cookies. But because of that relationship, she has introduced me to so many resources and individuals and other organizations that have been helpful. I don't know if that's recommended. I mean, if you bake, that's a great way to meet people.
Indeed.
Okay, thanks. And Natalie, did you have anything to add before we
No, I would say we're pretty similar in terms of just trying to make sure and show up at the events and make contact. And always on the lookout for what's new out there to make the new contacts.
Okay. And others on the call?
Jack,
yes, go ahead.
This is Jaleesa. We have a question from Isabel Rodriguez.
Okay.
How would we fit in to fill the gap that existing federally funded programs have not covered?
So, go ahead, Susan.
I'm trying to fill the gap. Well, do you mean by the financing your products and services? How would we fill in the gap?
Yes.
Well, I'm thinking of 3 areas. I'm thinking about just small consumer loans, primarily for assistive technology. I'm thinking of housing, and I'm thinking of small businesses. So there are huge gaps in providing, for example, affordable, accessible housing, right? There are long waiting lists for some of the government programs that many people won't even qualify for. So what CDFIs can do is help use their money, as long as at least 60% of the end user are low-income people. You can use your money to help fund housing or even the assistive technology that goes into housing. Most assistive technology, which is any device that helps a person with a disability to do the things they want to do, most devices are not covered by insurance or government programs. So whether it's a fence for a family with autism, or an iPad, or seat lift chairs, or grab bars, whatever, adapted vehicles, there may be partially funded by government resource if your state is lucky enough to have waiver programs. But in most cases, it's filling those gaps with our CDFI funds. And lastly, small businesses. There's a huge need for people with disabilities to find employment, and lots of people have wonderful ideas, and what CDFIs can do is do business planning and then also help provide some of the money that's needed to start up a small business. And that's where I think several of us, Danny, Charlie, and I, see the role of our programs is filling those gaps and allowing greater opportunities for people with disabilities with more flexible financing. Charlie and Danny, how would you answer that question?
Danny, you want to go first or you want me to talk?
Sure, I'll jump in. I unmuted just as the train went by. So yeah, I think when you talk about filling in the gap, just like Susan said, providing opportunity for people to get financing for something like a ramp, a widened doorway, smart home technologies. People often think of some of the smart home technologies as novel or cute, but if it means that I can turn the light on independently, or I can adjust the thermostat when the temperature cranks up, because in Georgia it can start out really cold and get really hot, not having to wait on an attendant to come do that. That's important. And like Susan said, there's not a lot of funding for that. Insurance isn't going to cover that. Medicare isn't going to cover smart home technologies, but that's where CDFIs can come in and make a difference. They can provide that opportunity to get the item or the device or the service that's going to help provide access to the home, the community, to work, whatever it might be. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is having those resources that a person can use how they need. And that's I think historically been a barrier for a lot of folks.
Okay, thanks. Charlie, quick response, and then we need to move on.
Yeah, no, I think I got it covered. That's fine. You can.
Okay, and anything else on this topic about developing relationships from any of the other participants?
Jack?
Yeah.
This is Jaleesa again. We have another question from Roxana Mercado. Does anyone have any suggestions in terms of language for the inclusion of this community when marketing or sharing our services?
Yeah, Danny, do you want to start?
Yes. So when we talk about language of inclusion, there's we have a whole presentation on that on the Tools for Life website that you're welcome to go to and download. When we talk about the type of language you use is, if you're face-to-face, don't be afraid to make a mistake. A lot of folks will correct you if you use the wrong term. A good baseline to start from is always people first language when you're talking about people with disabilities. So there's kind of two ways of thinking in the community. There's people first language, and then there's identity first language. And people first language, they tend to put the disability or the person before the disability. So, people would say a person with a visual disability, a person with a disability. You may refer to somebody as a wheelchair user. Never use wheelchair bound, ever. Don't, use terms that are more empowering. When we talk about identity first language, a lot of us in the community will use that. So you'll see, people with autism will just refer to themselves as autistic. In the NFB, I will just say I'm a blind person, or I'm blind, because that is something that I'm proud of. It's something that's an empowering thing to me. But when we talk about other organizations coming in and making that inroad, people first language is it's a good safe place to start. And then if you're working with a group or a community that want to use a different type, then go with what they want. Let the person with a disability be in charge of how they're referred to.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. And did we, I got to put my phone on mute. Excuse me, I got to put my phone on mute. I'm hopping between devices. So, and didn't we have a webinar on this?
There's going to be an upcoming webinar that's on marketing, that covers marketing as part of the agenda.
And marketing, okay. Let's move on. I think, Susan, you're the lead on the next bullet, which is providing concrete examples about how your CDFI can benefit another organization that you're reaching out to. Susan?
Oh, I was put on mute. Anyway, so the question really is, how can our CDFI help other organizations? One of the things that our organization can do is encourage some of the people who come to us, people with disabilities, family members, and older Pennsylvanians, and teach them around financial education topics, for example, understanding how, for example, how you can increase
Susan, 1 second. Susan, can I interrupt 1 second?
Yes.
I want people to know that this bullet and the next bullet are similar, and I may have misspoke. This particular bullet, we're asking about how do we work with somebody else to let them know how we can benefit their clients. So this focuses on our organization's ability to help their organization's clients. And then the next bullet is about expanding the impact of another organization. So they are related questions. So Susan, I'm going to let you go back to your discussion.
Okay. Well, hopefully this is kind of in line with what you're thinking, but what we can do is help people understand more about financial education components so that then they can go to another organization that we're not equipped. For example, we're not equipped to do small business lending. In the Philadelphia area, there are several CDFIs that do small business lending. That is outside of our wheelhouse. But what is in our wheelhouse is financial education and learning how to help people with disabilities increase their income, understanding identity theft, opening up a safe savings account such as the ABLE program. Those are some very concrete ways in which we can help someone then go to another organization to kind of achieve what their ultimate goal is, which is create small businesses. Or the other thing is we work with people who are credit invisible. That is very, because we do consumer lending, and some of our consumer lending is really quite small, down to $100. So it's not as much of a risk for us than it would be for some of the other CDFIs who are in fact doing larger consumer loans, housing loans, or again, small business. So if you're borrowing for assistive technology and we are reporting repayments to the three credit bureaus, at the end of your time with us, of paying us back, you now have, at a minimum, thin credit. That will help that person be able to go to another program and you have greater opportunities, whether you want to go into small business, whether you want to be employed. And of course, many employers are running credit reports. And if you have no credit, if you're credit invisible, you might not get that job. So that's one way our programs can help others. Is that what you were thinking about, Jack?
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
And then, Charlie, do you have some concrete examples about how a partnership with your CDFI can benefit some other organizations' clients?
Yes. So, in essence, that was what we created our CDFI all those years ago to do, which was to sort of, sit here and, take in questions and connect, one organization to another. So we've been successful, for instance, I'll give you one example of a loan that we did to a school in New York City that was having difficulty having cash flow issues because the city of New York was not paying tuition as quickly as they needed the tuition for to pay the teachers and the therapists and such. So in addition to doing a loan, which was our normal loan, in terms of what we did for the organization itself, We put them in touch with experts in the Department of Education who knew how to handle it, and made their processes a little better and made their communications a little better, so that setting aside what the CDFI work we did as a lender, we really helped them improve their operations. On another situation, we clearly saw that setting aside the money that was needed for another organization, they needed more corporate governance in terms of their organization. They needed to sort of be educated on more proper corporate governance styles. So rather than not do the loan, we did the loan, but we also put in the term sheet that they would invite us to their board meeting so that we can introduce them to proper consultants and others who are going to help them improve their organization as well. In terms of just real connecting between, for instance, on housing, we've been able to actually connect families together to, figure out how to handle either purchasing or leasing a house. We've done a lot of connecting in terms of taking our work but then really looking at other organizations and trying to build and improve upon their work in terms of the connections we made. One situation was in Baltimore, where in addition to us providing the loan for the housing, we gave so much connection to the organization that was borrowing from us with the state of Maryland, that the state of Maryland actually came in and started to look at how they could provide permanent financing, which was unheard of. They weren't even thinking about it. So we have a couple of those kind of examples, but it's very powerful when you're able to not just do a loan, but actually help the other organization grow.
Yeah, good, thanks. And so here for the participants, just thinking about this, as you're doing your outreach, you're identifying people and you're trying to figure out the message. How are you going to explain to them how you can help their clients? You're asking yourself prior to the contact, what is it that we have to offer? How is it we're going to carry out our work that benefits people with disabilities? And how is it going to help these other organizations? So you're asking yourself those questions, and you're coming into the initial conversations thinking about that. Danny, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I would just say, the ways that we benefit other organizations' clients are through that and capacity building for the individual, through doing a presentation, doing some of that counseling, pointing them in the right direction for, connecting that individual to the community that they're looking to be more involved in. But a lot of it is through that financial education, building the capacity. People have come through, we've actually had 2 people come through our program, Credit Able, and they one came in with a credit score of 0, and the other came in with just a really not great one. And through time, they were able to build up their credit scores. One went and was able to finance an accessible vehicle through a credit union, and the other was able to partner with another organization to start the process of purchasing a home. And so it was through the work that they did with us that kind of helped get them out on that right path. So those are some examples that we have from Georgia.
Good, okay, thanks. So folks, participants, let's hear from you. What experiences have you had in terms of giving examples about how your organization can help others?
This is Erica. I am very new to this role. I've actually been here 4 months. And the thing that I have really benefited in listening to these calls and also being in New Orleans is just every time I listen to you guys, I hear something else and that will help me move forward. But in visiting with, we're a very rural part of Arkansas. And we have, 2 hours from the nearest airport. It's very rural. So and getting out there and getting to talk to organizations and community places where we would like to help with financial education, you're finding that not a lot of people have heard of like the ABLE account. And so it's just been very rewarding for me to listen to you guys so that when I go out there and present information, I'm building those relationships and those partnerships, and I think we're learning it together. And so thank you for putting these on. I've been working with, it's Network of Community Operations here in Arkansas, and they just kind of help with financial. They have day centers, and so they help their clients and going in there and talking to them and figuring out how we can get in there and do educational classes, which that wasn't even on the radar for our bank 4 months ago. And so it's just listening to you guys and helping me learn and get out there. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Erica. Okay, anybody else have questions or comments on this topic before we move on? Other participants? No? Okay. The next issue that we're focusing on is developing, how can you, an organization that's trying to develop these partnerships, how can you develop your message on how your CDFI can offer people with disability finance opportunities and also help disability organizations expand their impact? In other words, look at what the partners you're looking at or the providers that you're looking at. How can you develop your message about how can you help them do their job better? So on this one, Susan, I've got you down as the first to speak.
Okay, thank you, Jack. I've got some examples of what we've done just in the last year. We've got a couple of examples of, and it goes back somewhat in when you're developing your message, you're also thinking about your marketing. So and there will be a webinar in the next month about this, but when we're developing our message, what we're doing is trying to empower people with disabilities, right? So we are including a partnership, and one example was with the larger ARC of Pittsburgh. So its name is Achieva. So we developed a program with Achieva where Achieva is looking at expanding housing options for people with disabilities. So they're looking at ways in which people with disabilities can find a home of their own. So we developed a brochure and a message that we sent out through social media and a few mailings, but not much, where we included people with disabilities in the community near homes, in homes. And what we merged was a trusted partner, the ARC of Pittsburgh, named as Achieva, and us. And we could help with A, the financial education, and B, with some of the financing so that people with disabilities could have a home of their own. So we merged our two programs, one a provider agency, Achieva. They provide services, zero financing. So then they merged with us, and we could do both the financial education and the financing. Another thing that we did is on the eastern part of Pennsylvania, we were really trying to break out and promote the ABLE program, the Achieving a Better Life Experience, a Safe Way to Save for People with Disabilities. So what we want to do is help our Treasury establish ABLE programs so that then they can buy those devices, to be very narrow, so they can then buy assistive technology. So we did joint programs with Treasury, and again, the outreach that we did was showing people being empowered in financial situations in a bank, another couple of people going to school or work, and then we talked about ABLE and how the ABLE program could help people. For example, you can save safely to get your adapted vehicle so that you can go to work or go to school. That was one example. Another one was helping people get consumer loans for tablets so that you could go to school. And then we had a picture in a restaurant of two people who were deaf using smartphones, which we would fund in our program, but you could save for some of this in your ABLE program. So our messaging is A, people with disabilities and empowering, B, partnerships, because we cannot do it alone. So Treasury, our treasurer actually gets $1.3 million a year to do outreach around ABLE. So we want to be their partner because they cannot provide financial education, nor are they advising people how to use their money. They're there to create the ABLE program. So we're delighted to work with Treasury because we want to help people figure out how they can spend their money. So those are two examples of what we've done just in the last year of messaging, giving the empowerment of being in charge of your own financial future in those two examples.
Okay, thanks, Susan. And then Charlie, I've got you down as next for talking about developing a message.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think Danny made a comment before about don't be afraid to to do things or make mistakes. Here's a very good topic on that as well, which is, as a CDFI trying to marry the disability world and the CDFI world, and it could be housing, it could be the assistive technology. This is unprecedented territory in a general way. So while you have some experts on the phone, Susan, Dan, and myself, others, Jack, who have some experience on it, it's not natural. It's the CDFI industry has been around for a long time. Disability industry has been around, and the community has been around for a long time, and it really isn't natural that they've been meeting. It's been people like us have been trying to force it. So when you develop the message on how to do financing, it doesn't have to be cookie cutter. You can, and you should have products, and that's what we all are. We're CDFIs, and we should have products and everything else. But at the same time, flexibility is good. Learning how to, our favorite phrase is, try a pilot program. It's okay to try something that may not look perfect in the boxes that you've already created within your organizations. And in our loan policies, since day one, we actually created, in addition to all of our products, we created an other category. So that way that the loan committee and the board and everybody could actually embrace a new message. So if we decided to get involved in doing our first business loan, and we've never done business lending before, and we're not really an SBA lender, but we wanted to try something new because it looked very interesting and everything else, we were able to do it. And then 2 or 3 loans later, we then created a new product called business loans that it's now standard operating procedure for us. So when you're developing that message on how you want to use your CDFI with the community and how you're going to help and everything else, don't be afraid to not only develop the message, but as Danny said before, you're allowed to make a mistake. You can then correct mistakes. You can expand your message, and you can actually narrow your message, because if you come out of the box and something's not working, then you can take it off the table and do something else. So that would be my little 2 cents on this, because we've been testing this for many years now, and it's been a lot of fun to see where life takes you.
Good. Okay, thanks, Charlie. Danny, do you have anything to add here on developing your message on how your CDFI can offer finance opportunities for people with disabilities and also help other organizations expand their impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just hammer back it all goes down to those referral relationships and those relationships you have with the community. That's one of the ways that our program here has been able to expand into new communities and to spread the word about what we do, is those relationships with, not just disability organizations, but, I've reached out to several credit unions and banks and lenders and, commissioners and whatnot. So being able to know that, you know, you're working with different organizations and you're, if it's something that you can't do, you know who to refer them to. And same thing with that group. It might be, we've been working a lot with a Regions Bank here. And it's one of those things where if somebody comes into a bank and they need a $250 loan, that bank is not going to do that. But they know that we are here in Georgia as a resource to send those folks to if it's specific to assistive technology. So that's probably one of the most important things, is just having a broad range of relationships with many different organizations.
Okay, great. Thanks. And let's turn to all the other participants. People have comments about experiences they've had with messaging or questions for us on this subtopic.
Oh, hi, yeah, this is Galen Gandolfi from Justine Peterson, Great Rivers Community Capital in St. Louis. If anything, the challenge that we maybe have here is somewhat nuanced, and that is we're known in the community and we're known to perhaps service providers who service this population as doing explicitly small business loans, and we now have an amount of money from the CDFI fund that we crafted a consumer finance product that could be available to this population, and so we have to remessage, if you will, or I don't want to say there's distortion in the marketplace for us, but it's not so much that there's lack of awareness. There's lack of awareness of our new product. So it just adds maybe a new layer of challenge for us from a messaging perspective.
So you're in St. Louis?
Correct.
Okay, so my alma mater, Washington University in St. Louis, I would say to you that, and we make these recommendations all the time, give the business school a call. Give Olin Business School a call and talk to the dean's office, talk to a professor there, and give a little, you know, competition or a contest to the undergrads or the grads or somebody to help you with messaging, and pull them in as sort of a creative way that would be of little cost to you, gets the community at a very large level sort of connected to your work, and you can get help with, you know, the messaging, and spend time with whether it's professors or grad students and such, and say, look, here's our problem, here's who we are, here's the message we're trying to get across, this is what's not working, do you guys have suggestions? Give that a try. Crazier things have happened, is all I could say.
Thanks.
Thank you, Galen.
Yeah, no.
Anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
And
okay.
also in St. Louis, just so you know, what organization are you from? I'm sorry.
Sure. So the true name of our CDFI is Great Rivers Community Capital, but we're better known as Justine Peterson, which is the 501c3.
Of course. So yes, just as an aside, you guys were our co-honorees back at OFN when we both won the next awards. We were on the stage together. So you have in your backyard also Mercy Partnership.
Correct.
And you should talk to them, because not only are they good with PRIs, but they're very good also with these kind of situations. So you may, if you don't know Sarah Smith, offline, I could, I'm sure we have your contact information.
No, sure. I mean, we have an investment with Mercy and such, of course.
So I would talk to them about it. Sarah would love to connect with you and you know, give them a problem. They love to solve problems too, not just invest. So they're very good partners.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else before we move on to the next topic? Okay, I'm going to, Jaleesa, you're up, but before we get there, I'm just going to point out to people, because it's sort of a bit of a transition. I tried to do this earlier when my computer fritzed. In our handbook that people that attended training would have gotten, it's called Expanding the Capacity of CDFIs to Serve People with Disabilities. that handbook includes in Module 9, Market and Strategy, and it talks about reaching out to stakeholders. So it's very much in keeping with this community of practice call. On page 93, there's a list of national disability networks, and it includes, you know, sort of private national organizations such as the National Federation of the Blind that Danny mentioned, so it includes them. It also includes organizations of governmental organizations such as Aging and Disability Resource Centers. There's a website there, a Council of State VR agencies. There's a website there. And these are places that you can go to. You can contact the national organizations and see if they have local representatives. As you're trying to figure out your outreach efforts and your identification of potential partners and people to work with, this is a good resource. And now, Jaleesa, it's up to you to bring us home with this last subject area, how to collaborate with government entities to take advantage of what they offer and build up a CDFI's portfolio.
Thanks, Jack, although that's a lot of pressure for being the newbie on the call. Hi, everyone. I'm Jaleesa Cully, and I'm from the Institute for Community Inclusion. And we offer training, clinical employment services. We conduct research and provide assistance to organizations to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities in school, work, and community activities. And myself particularly, I really work with a lot of I've done extensive work with government agencies nationwide around employment and people with disabilities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the government entities found in each state that directly work and provide services to individuals with disabilities, with a focus on economic development and self-sufficiency, where there really is an opportunity to collaborate and partner with them. In some cases, such as vocational rehabilitation, and in some states, there's a sole entity, and in some cases, they also have a separate commission for the blind, as well as intellectual developmental disability services. These entities work with the disability community directly, and that's their primary audience and population that they work with. In other cases, such as the state welfare and TANF programs, the workforce system, and the Veterans Administration, they serve a broader community, but that includes people with disabilities. And what we find is a lot of times, the very individuals in the community that have disabilities that are working with USCDFIs are also potentially working with multiple government agencies. So what are the benefits in connecting and partnering with these entities in your state? So as I referenced earlier, some have very specific disability expertise that can be invaluable for you as you start working with this community. So in terms of accessibility, in terms of accommodations, in terms of just being able to outreach and connect with this group. The vocational rehabilitation agencies, for example, provide services to their local partners and businesses that a lot of times people just think that they exclusively work with the actual individuals who have disabilities, and that is their primary customer. But they also deliver disability awareness and etiquette training to their partners. They conduct job site modifications and assistive technology consultations. And as you're kind of thinking of your portfolios, another thing to note is as they're working with the actual individuals who have disabilities on their employment goals, oftentimes that may lead to individuals wanting to start small businesses. And so there's definitely a direct correlation there. Most of these government entities have access to subject matter experts in benefit counseling, accessibility, the ticket to work. That is information that would be very useful for you guys to be able to tap into. An advantage is that they're well known in their communities and can be of assistance in promoting your services with the clients that they serve. They also work with community rehabilitation providers, and earlier, someone mentioned Easter Seals. There's a lot of community rehab providers that work across these different government entities, and so these are very much oftentimes the same local and community organizations that you are already partnering with. These entities often implement and participate in new initiatives focusing on supporting self-sufficiency, such things as career pathways, opportunities to access higher paying jobs, financial education. I know that, for example, in Illinois, the welfare agency has some federal incentives. They're looking at a small pilot where these incentives are geared at helping individuals buy their first homes and similar type of initiatives. Your expertise as CDFIs in these areas would be an asset to them. And so that lends itself to opening the door for some collaboration. And then for you, what it does is then it gives you access and opens the door to the disability community itself. Establishing partnerships with these entities benefits them and you by creating a referral pipeline, and it really goes both ways. So as you can be a resource that they offer their clients, and in turn, as you are working with individuals who have disabilities, you are able, you know, if there's a need and they're not already working with these entities, it actually makes for a very kind of clean referral process where it makes sense you're providing an extra layer of resources for them. So some of the points, you know, Susan, Danny, and Charlie have talked about some strategies in terms of how to partner. So some additional pieces, advisory committees, inviting them to sit on your advisory board or form an advisory committee that includes members from these groups. And then also have your staff participate in their open forums and their advisory committees. Another strategy is connecting with your state rehabilitation council. So each state has one of these. The members of the council are appointed by the governor's office, and they include representatives from most of these state entities, and also include individuals with disabilities and advocates as members of the council. For agencies that are more employment focused, like IDD or vocational rehabilitation, or even the veterans that I had mentioned, I think there's an opportunity for you as CDFIs to offer on-the-job training opportunities. This gives you a chance to work directly with individuals with disabilities. And then it gives the individuals who are looking to work in financial services an opportunity to get some work experience. So these are some ideas just to kind of open up the floor for our discussion. Jack?
Okay, thanks, Delisa. And then I think that Susan, Charlie, and Danny all have some something to add here. Susan, do you want to go first? Can you hear me?
Okay, there. Yeah, it keeps going to be muted. To be very concrete about how our kinds of CDFIs can work with government entities and collaborate so that everyone benefits, is that, as Julissa mentioned, the vocational rehabilitation, their whole job is to get people with disabilities employed. And there are some things they can do and some things they can't do. So they can help purchase some assistive technology for people, but not everything. So for example, they can help purchase the adaptations to a vehicle, but not the vehicle itself. So that's how our CDFI works with one way our CDFI works with vocational rehabilitation, is that they know us as a partner, and we've developed that relationship over time. So that goes back up to what we talked about earlier, is letting vocational rehabilitation know that you exist, and that we're there to help provide the financing for the vehicle, for the chassis. Vocational rehabilitation, they're also very invested under their guiding legislation, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, to provide financial education. So their counselors are actually not doing much of the financial education themselves, but rather they contract out with other organizations. And that's true to every state in the country. So what we've done is we have let our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation know about our financial education materials, and specifically some of the differences for people with disabilities, like, you know, understanding ABLE is just an example, unearned income, the transition checklist. Other CDFIs can do the exact same thing of partnering and becoming a real partner and collaborator with vocational rehabilitation. The Department of Education, They provide services to students who have disabilities, but they must be educationally related, so that the Department of Education, they do not provide home modifications or vehicles or anything of that sort. So if the Department of Education knows about you, they will then help, again, as Julissa said, be a referral source, saying, you need a home modification, here's this program that will help you finance it, or will tell you about funding resources that we don't know about. The same with financial education. Many states have legislation that says course in personal finance will count towards graduation in your, in your upper schools. But they don't necessarily provide that financial education. So you've got the Jumpstart Coalition, a national coalition that's interested in providing financial education in high schools and middle schools and elementary schools. But we too can be members of the Jumpstart Coalition and help provide financial education through the Department of Education. Housing, as Julissa mentioned, all states have a housing finance agency. They all have programs for first-time homeowners, for people with disabilities, but you're piecemealing some of that financing because they're doing the first mortgage. So that's another way, those three ways are specific examples of how a CDFI can go into those three agencies.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I'm going to add a couple things and then turn to Charlie and Danny. In our state, our Division of Financial Institutions is the regulatory agency of credit unions and banks. And they have grants, and my organization was able to get a grant because they have a big effort on financial education, and we were able to work with them and identify the need in the disability community, and then actually get funded. The other organization, I think we may have talked about earlier, is there are regional ADA offices, and they have very good connections because they're regional organizations. They will know disability organizations that you might be able to partner with, and they understand what's going on. Just like a government, the earlier mention was a government, the governor's disability association or agency would do that. So Danny, did you want to go next?
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Yes. Yeah. So what we've talked about so far is spot on. So working with vocational rehabilitation, I know every state's a little bit different here. There's a big push for what are called pre-ETS services. It's pre-employment transition services. So that is an opportunity for a CDFI to come in and help provide some of that financial education, to provide some of those resources that are there that a person can use when they're getting ready to go into the job market, or getting ready to transition from living with mom and dad to living on their own, or wherever it might be. Working with your DD Council, Developmental Disabilities Council, State Rehabilitation Council, all of that. Those are definitely great ways to connect, to help learn more about what roles you can fill, where you can be a support, and then also to find the supports that you can then refer people to. That's vital.
Okay, thanks. Charlie, on this issue.
Yeah, so just one quickie in terms of an example. So we got involved in a very interesting way with the government through the disaster that we had here in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut with Superstorm Sandy. So just when you think, what does that have to do with disabilities? Well, the fact is that there were a lot of issues for people with disabilities. We didn't have it in our charter. We didn't have it in our mandate. We didn't have it on our strategic plan. You know, an emergency happened, and we responded because there was nobody else to fill that void. So the government was trying to figure out how to work on the recovery issues. Obviously, the American Red Cross came in with, you know, the immediate kind of need, but then after everything subsided, after a few weeks, we found ourselves at the table with Nassau County, with New York State, with New Jersey, officials. We had people coming from DC who were trying to help, and we didn't force our way in. We got the phone call, and we said, they saw basically our name and our organization and said, hey, we need help. Can you help us? And one of the wonderful things that came out of all of that is that FEMA never had a disaster recovery team only for people with disabilities until after that event. And now it's sort of normal procedure, and they have a team that when there is a disaster, there's a team from FEMA that responds only on disability issues, obviously teaming up with other government agencies and everything else. But it was fascinating to know that as a little CDFI that's supposed to be a loan fund, we're able to sort of get involved without even wanting to be involved. We sort of answered the clarion call, and now, you know, we became experts in something, and then ended up doing some lending in that arena as well. So it was very, very fascinating. But that was just one example of, you never know how the government will respond to you as a CDFI, and how they can use you. So that's what I got for you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Jack,
so let's.
Jack,
yes.
I actually have a question in the chat box. It's from Roxana Mercado. When it comes to consumer lending, are there any initiatives or ideas when it comes to providing services but protecting those with disabilities from fraud or identity theft at the same time? Are those with disabilities considered targets or easily vulnerable to fraud or identity theft? How can we help, especially when providing services remotely?
So that, thanks for Roxana for that question. You know, our next community of practice is on assistive technology lending, consumer lending. And I know that Susan has responded to Roxana. And I guess what I'd like to do is hold off on that just now. Susan, can you respond to her directly on that?
Yes.
And then let's ask ourselves about this more general question about collaborating with government entities. Are there any questions or concerns here that people have and want to raise at this point? And then we'll go into sort of overall questions. So on this last bullet, how to collaborate with government entities and taking advantage of what they have to offer. Any comments or questions from participants on this? Not seeing anything come up. Okay, well, let's turn to the general. So overall, we've thrown a lot out at people, and we're very interested in making sure that people have an opportunity to raise issues that our presentation has raised, and we'll try and answer those now. Anything else to offer? For instance, Anna and Natalie have some experience in this field. Do either of you have anything to add in general about this partnering and identification of partners?
This is Anna. I don't think I have anything else to add at this time.
Okay, thanks. Natalie, how about you?
No, I think you guys have done a great job covering it.
Okay. Anybody else? And if not, maybe Susan, you could respond to Roxana's question.
Sure, and other people, I'm sure Danny and Charlie have the same thing. I mean, I think the question is, as we're working with people with disabilities, are there some unique needs around identity theft and scamming? And if so, what are some of the techniques that you do so that people can, you know, participate in our programs and do so safely? So, of course, seniors are a great target for scamming, as we all know. So we encourage in our financial education some of the same techniques of, you know, checking out websites and making sure the web browser, you know, it has HTTPS or a lock on it, not giving out information such as your social security number. Even on our website, our online application, we do not allow that part of the form to be completed when we're asking for social security numbers. People have to contact us or we contact them. Those are, you know, because we certainly see that social security numbers are at risk of being shared and we don't want to do that. We actually, because we're a small organization, we do not take credit cards. We work with PayPal or, you know, automatic debits, but we are concerned about identity theft or being able to protect against credit card fraud. So we just don't have the people power to do consumer loans and have those payments made. We do a lot with texting of reminding people when we're going to do an automatic withdrawal so that if, in fact, there is a mistake, someone has an opportunity to talk to us. So I think texting, certainly for younger people, is a very helpful way to communicate, not just by the phone if someone has trouble answering a phone. We talk a lot about different ways to access information on your banking account, that it doesn't have to just be online, but you can get paper statements or you can call in. We work with Treasury a lot to make sure that some programs, such as in Ohio, they only work electronically. Not so in Pennsylvania. We talked all about having what works for you, so the reasonable accommodation. So for some people who do not have such easy access to a computer or are reliant on a caregiver, we stress the importance then of getting paper statements or allowing you to make changes, withdrawals, whatever, on the phone. So those are just a couple of things I'd want to quickly get in, but Danny and Charlie, I'm sure you've also got experience with this.
Yeah, we actually have a presentation that we do for our consumers on identity theft and fraud and, you know, helping with building some of that kind of basic knowledge of spotting a scam before you fall for it. And then, you know, we also encourage people to be in touch with, you know, with their bankers, with their independent living center. And if they do have a question, you know, I always tell people, like, question everything. If you're not comfortable with something, if somebody's asking you for information that you don't want to give over the phone, you know, ask for their number to give them a call back, and then talk to a peer supporter to verify with that, or talk to you know, a family member or a trusted friend to go over that. That is a, you know, a big problem, especially when you look at people. You know, we've seen a lot of people targeted in the developmental and intellectual disability community. People have been trying to take advantage of folks that you know, are out on their own and, you know, living their life, but you do see some of those kind of predatory folks creep up. So we always come from a place of advocacy, making sure that the person feels empowered to question those things and knowing the resources they have at their disposal to make sure that everything's on the up and up.
Okay, thanks, Danny. It looks like our time is up. If there's anybody else that has questions, you know that you can reach us. I think on the last communication I had my cell phone number. You can certainly contact me. I want to point out that the next community of practice call is on March 5th, and its addresses Assistive Technology Lending. So we hope to hear from all of you, and thank you all for participating. DeBrittany or Jaleesa, is there anything else we need to address?
Nope, we are all set.
Okay. Thank you all.